Robert DiFazio, and here we are at Columbia College, and I've been here since '05, in the fall of '05. And my background is as a musician from childhood. As soon as I can remember, I got stuffed in piano lessons, you know, dragged down to do that. And I think I was very lucky to have my mother invest in me musically. And I don't know so much if it was she thought that I was very talented or that she thought that she needed some time to herself or what have you, but I did piano lessons, and I played the saxophone in the jazz ensembles in prep school, and then I got into college and I started getting interested in guitar. And the degree that I have from DePaul is in sound recording technology. So at a certain point I decided that I was going to be on the other side of the glass, so to speak. And as far as I got started in the recording industry, it was a very easy thing for me to do because it was sort of forced on me in a way. I was very young, and I purchased a guitar at a yard sale. A very simple thing to do. A pretty guitar. It looked nice, shiny. I had no intention of playing it. I just simply wanted to have something cool in my room to look at, you know. And my friend says, "Oh, you've got a guitar?" You know, my good friend. He says, "You're in my band." I said, "No, I'm not. I don't play." And he says, "Too bad. You're coming over." And I got involved with the band from a very early age of maybe 14, where I was involved with a group called Mark One. Mark-1.com is the address for that band that no longer functions, but we did put out 2 records together. And they are progressive rock theme type albums, primarily for really artsy folks. I suppose Europeans really like the music a lot. Sold a lot of records in France and Iceland, and not in America. And we had a very comfortable music recording studio that was beyond my means anyways, and mostly financed by the drummer. We had Kyle Jones as the lead vocalist. He's the guy who got me involved in the group. And then Chris Malinsky, the drummer, had, back in 1996 even, the ability for us to go over to his house, work in a fairly well put together recording studio with 24 tracks and CD burning technology, which blew my mind. This is when you put the CD in the case, and then you put the case in the computer. And the CDs were like $20 a piece, so you better not screw them up, you know. And I worked at a sub shop. I bought myself a nice PA system. We played shows. We worked 5 days a week. And I think that's the best training you can get because it was done in the spirit of friendship, you know. And the studio was always a very fun place to be, and I always look forward to it. As soon as I got out of work, I'd run outside, get in the van, run to the studio. We would all set up in the round, and we called our studio the Briar Patch because you could not walk across it. So many cables, so much muck. All you could hope to do was throw things at people. And we put out those 2 records that I mentioned. In 2000, we got a nice little deal with a French record distributor called Musea Records, or Musea, excuse me if I pronounced that wrong. And they picked up our record and distribute it even to this day in little boutique record store shops, and we're part of their catalog. And every once in a while I'll get a rogue email from people from like Uzbekistan who like our music and all that. And we were fairly well reviewed, and lo and behold, Peter Gabriel found us out, and we began a little email correspondence with him. This was one of the motivating factors for me to continue in the music business, was that by grace of whatever, somehow, from our little studio in Gloucester, Massachusetts, we got the attention of Peter Gabriel, who was gracious enough to write us an email and tell us how good of a little job we were doing, and told us not to sign a contract. He told us he'd like to come see us play live, and as you could imagine, we were just freaking out, running up and down the halls, didn't know what to do with ourselves. So that propelled me to, you know, I think that was the major motivating factor in me saying, you know, I'm not going to do business or a business degree, or I'm not going to do journalism. I'm going to do music. You know, I can do this. As it turned out, we never really capitalized on that, unfortunately, for a number of reasons. That the whole tour that we had planned never really materialized, unfortunately. But it inspired me to find my way into the recording studio so that I could make better product, because I really felt that the records that we had made in our little home studio were interesting to listen to and intriguing and all that, but they certainly weren't sort of professionally saleable broadcast quality records, which is what I have a real affection for. I love Steely Dan and Genesis and things that are highly contrived, well-produced art, you know. Not to say that I don't like Bob Dylan, I don't like a little folk. I like things that are out of tune, too. You know? But my music sounds much like a combination of Steely Dan and Genesis. It's structural, and it has a lot of production to it. So I got myself out of college and into an internship at a recording studio where I was, phone boy, stamp licker, errand man. For a while, and began working for a private school inside of a recording studio called the Music Industry Workshop. And this private vocational school services a different range of students than a college would. The classes at the Music Industry Workshop range from a couple $100 up to maybe $4,000. And you can study music production, you can study sound engineering, you can study music business and things like that. But what my responsibility was when I began was not designing curriculum or teaching anybody. It was just not screwing up basic things like answering the phone. Later on, what happened was one of my superiors quit, got a little promotion, assistant sales manager. Another superior quit, moved away, another promotion. Worked my way up to being general manager of this small school called the Music Industry Workshop. And I think that is how I ended up here at Columbia. I don't think that there's any other way that I would have been involved in higher education if it weren't for that. Now, running a small school was a different experience for me. It's not like running a kitchen or anything like that, like I had done in the past. You got to find all the problems with the school and fix it. Basically, was my ultimate goal, and my job was to ensure the quality of the classes that we were teaching. So this could be, curriculum development, counseling students, doing open houses and tours and things like that, finding the right teachers, creating lab activities, grading papers and tests and things like that. And not all of it was my direct responsibility, but I was involved in just about everything from the front door to the back door of this small school. And one of the instructors there let me know that there was an opening here at Columbia, and I interviewed for it and got the job in 2005. So I'm an adjunct professor, part-time faculty, teach about 18 credits a year, so about 9 a semester. And right now I'm teaching the Art and Business of Recording, which is a 15-week seminar for freshmen that is topic matter from all across the music business. A little bit of publishing, a little bit of copywriting, a little bit about record contracts, and alike, also about radio and broadcasting and music formats, genres in music we talk about. We talk about music appreciation, a little music history, and a little music theory. Wham, But I also teach a course called Producing Recorded Music, which is a little bit more up my alley, so to speak, in so much as that it's concentrated specifically on introduction to the concept of music producing. So it's not a hodgepodge at all. It's very much more narrow content for sophomores. So first of all, what I can tell you is that these people have passed my first class, which is good because it's like a sort of academic achievement that lends to a smaller, more edified group of people where you've kind of weeded out the people who aren't really truly geared towards music production. And we do record production history. We do introduction to the studio environment so that the students feel like they can stand on their own 2 feet and they know about microphones and audio consoles and signal processors and Pro Tools, Not from an engineering standpoint to the point where they're going to go home and build their own console, but from the point of view that they understand the creative tools that are at their disposal and the terms and definitions and just the ability to communicate technically in the studio and do their own types of projects, record their own vocals, set up their own MIDI studios and programming and things like that. And also we do a in-studio recording and mixing session over 2 days, which is a fun activity in this class. Now, none of the students in this class generally have recorded in a professional recording studio with a live band, 24 microphones going on at the same time. So for all intents and purposes, at the level of PRM1, we're talking about demonstrational edification. It's not a hands-on, all the students are going to roll up their sleeves and each produce their own hit record. That comes later on in the program. So I assume we'll be talking about the progression of classes here at Columbia. And once they get out of my producing one class, they do producing two, which is all in the studio, and then producing three, where they all have their own artists, and then producing four, where they get a budget and they have to produce a record for which they will have to present in front of a jury at the end. So it's just a sort of staggered achievement, each PRM1 class becoming more intense, and I like the way that the classes are structured here. I think that producing is a curriculum that you don't often find in schools. For me at DePaul, for most people at any type of school, I think even Berkeley College of Music, all these different schools, they have a sound recording department, they have a music department. And never the two shall twine, it seems, or infrequently at best. And so you learn technology, you learn how to work a studio, and then you learn how to play and write music. And then however you want to put those two things together, go on and do it. But here at Columbia, there's a whole lot more. There's a whole concentration called music production, which combines the two skills and talks about music formatting and marketing and arrangement and recording, all in this open forum, so that there's not such a disparity between the skill sets. So that's why I'm attracted to it. In my mind, the question relates itself to what is the value of music, and that is an enormous topic for which I hope to expand on today. But as far as what's valuable about music production, or what my philosophy towards music production is, I think I would sum it up by saying it is the realization of a lyric and a melody. And I am not the songwriting producer. If I had hit songs bouncing around in my head all day, you better believe I'd be producing them. I'm just not that sort of creative mind. I'm an arranger. I'm a person who sets the scene, so to speak. So Phil Ramone, everybody knows, is one of the greatest and most admired record producers. And his analogy is, as I'm sure you well know, that producing a record is much like directing a movie. You've got a script, you've got a sort of modus operandum, what this is about, and your job is all of the details that are necessary to realize these bunch of words here on this page as a movie. And my job as a record producer is to properly realize the lyrical content and the melodic message of a song as a record. So to do that is sometimes clicks. Boom, this person knows what the kind of music they want to make. I'm working with a new artist called Angie Griffith. She's young. I think she's about 19 years old. She's a songwriter. She writes a type of Avril Lavigne type music. And she's one of these people who has more songs than we could possibly choose from. My first sort of operation when producing a record with someone like that is to just get into a rehearsal room somewhere where that person can have their guitar or their piano or whatever, or even just their voice, and sing and perform all their material to me. And you and I were talking about earlier what an amazing experience that is. You're like the first audience member. So that's the most exciting time in the making of a record, is when you are sifting through all the songs of this person's head and deciding how you're going to structure them into a concept. And people don't want to kill their babies. You have to be light-handed with that whole process. But I was shocked by this young lady because, just frankly, I can't imagine how she learned to write a good song. How does one learn to write a good song? Can't explain it. I mean, for all my ability to teach and explain things, I cannot really explain how you write a great song. I mean, how does that happen? One person in a room all by themselves comes up with this great song. And my job with her was to find a good range of songs for her to put on her record, and songs that I could tell were signature songs for her, and songs that I felt really deserved the whole process of being in the studio and being realized and everything like that. But the philosophy from there, once you've devised the right group of songs, and all parties, however many there are, agree that these are the group of songs that we are going to put on our record. The next thing, next most important thing you can do is find the right personnel to be a part of the process. Meaning, even down to like who's going to be your studio assistant, who are going to be the people in the room, who's going to play the instruments, who's going to do the technical side of things, and make sure you establish the right group of people, because things can go so wrong if your egos get mixed up or people feel like their time is being wasted or anything like that. So the whole hiring and administering of a record is equally as important as choosing the right songs. And then from there, I would use the philosophy that all music is an experiment and that everybody has an opportunity to present their ideas. This is the George Martin way of looking at it. The George Martin way of looking at it, as I understand from his interviews, is all he feels obligated to do is tell the client what he really thinks. You know, and if they don't take it to heart, and if they do nothing with that information, you know, at least I told you so kind of thing. And then there are some producers, maybe more of like your Mutt Lange, you know, really proven super hit maker producers who are more dictators. I don't know Mutt Lange. I don't have any experience with his interviews, but from people that have spoke on the subject, he's a person who you can bring in to really tell you what you need to do, line people up. You do this, you do that. Here we go. This is the way it's going to go down. We're going to use all these 96 tracks, and much more of not a dictator in the you know strict sense of the word, but somebody whom you wouldn't necessarily be going too back and forth with. With me, I mean, in the interest of not wasting studio time, I will tell you this is not a good idea. I really strongly think we should not waste our time on this, but I probably will, even if I think that. If the artist is that motivated to try out their idea, or to come in and do a xylophone track, or to do a backwards piano thing, or to say something so crazy that at first I would say, like, what? Are you kidding? But I will try it. Because music is a humongous experiment to me. And once you've got the songs and the personnel, it's all about experimenting until you get the shivers on your back and you say, this is it, you know, this is the way it should be. Teaching it to students is very much about having them experience an actual session at the end of the day. Because in the producing class, we have what amounts to about 24 hours worth of class time on the fundamentals. Starting with Thomas Edison. This is the acoustic recording, electric recording. We talk about magnetic tape recording. We talk about editing. We talk about the digital era. And microphones and consoles and all this stuff is flooding their head, you know. They need to see human beings interact with each other and use this information in a creative, purposeful way before they can assimilate how to make use of all this information. You know, oh, great. So you're telling me, Bob, that there's like 70 different types of microphones that I can use. Great. I mean, it's almost like choose for me now because I'm sort of, you know, smothered with all the options that you've just presented me. Now you're telling me that there's parametric EQs, shelving EQs, filters, compressors, limiters, gates, expanders. They need to see it put into practice. And so my recording sessions that I execute as a part of the producing recorded music class are with bands that I bring to the table. In my experience, and from talking with a number of people from other institutions, there's sometimes a situation where the instructor will get up in front of the class and he will say, okay, who's got a band? And who wants to be the band for this class? And I think that that's complete crap because I want my students to experience a professional recording session. And obviously you can't be on two sides of the glass at one time. If you're in the class, you shouldn't be performing. You should be recording. But beyond that, I want my band to know full well what is the purpose of this session. And the purpose of the session cannot be to produce your music in a hit way because obviously in 8 hours you're not going to make that many hit songs. So I get a band, sometimes even an 8-piece band. Sometimes I even pay these people. Not much. To come in and be complacent and be creative and respond to anything that the students have to say. And they understand at the end of the day that this is for the students. This is not a professional recording session for you to make something and put it on YouTube and get famous. You're doing this as a favor to me or as a favor to the students, but however you want to look at it, you guys are not here to make a hit record. You're here to make a complacent experience for the students so that they can learn, so that they can see me and you interact without feeling like the clock is running, without feeling inhibited, so that the students actually participate. And that might not be the most real experience for them, and I feel like they're going to have real experiences in their life where there will be on the clock, where the artist will be upset, where there will be egos clashing and everything like that, but I don't want that to be a part of their first experience. So that's how I try to teach it to my students, is in an environment that is literally somewhat controlled, so that they feel positive about what recording is, and that they feel like it's valuable, and that they're not distracted by egos. Well, pre-production is the most laborsome portion of any record. So luckily, every band that I've worked with has some sort of recording environment. Some of the artists that I work with do not. They have their instrument, they have their lyrics, their talent. But a new band I'm producing called Way of Man from Indiana. They're nice guys. They will come and pick me up on a Saturday and take me out to Indiana, and we will experiment in their studio where nobody's paying anybody, and we can figure out all of the nuts and bolts of the arrangement before we get into a $100 an hour recording studio. So to be honest with you, once we're in production, hopefully we're not figuring out very much. Hopefully what we're doing is executing what we have all well agreed on is what we want to be the arrangement or the core or the solo or any of the lyrics or anything like that. Really shouldn't come up as a judgment call in the middle of a production in a $100 an hour studio. So the way I work that all out is in rudimentary Pro Tools studios in people's basements, where they feel a lot more comfortable and willing to participate and try new effects and play it an octave higher, and here, do a mandolin part, and who knows what could happen, but at least there's no pressure. And even the most experienced people will collapse once they feel like they have to rush because the next client's coming in, or they're running out of money or anything like that. So I frankly don't like to be that creative in the actual studio if I can help it. There are some artists who are so spontaneous that all that stuff is going to get thrown out of the window anyways. But I do have a propensity to be very methodical. Whether I'm teaching or making a record, I do not like doing anything without a plan, personally. I don't feel comfortable with other people's time and money in the studio if we're not all in agreement. And I like I said, I have the philosophy to where I will not disagree with you to the bitter end. I will make my point. I will tell you my objective thoughts on each part of the arrangement. But your face is on the cover of the record. You are going to have to go play these songs in front of people for untold numbers of years, not me. So if there's a situation where there's a conflict or any type of quandary where one person says, I want to do the guitar solo, and this has happened a million times. We've got a studio musician who wants to do the guitar solo, and they're here for the express purpose of doing the guitar solo, and they nail it. And I say on the talk back, we're done. That was it. I'm having shivers. And the singer says, well, I want my guitar player to try because he's the guy who's going to do it on the road. And he's been in this band for a really long time. So why don't we let him try? And based on the philosophy I've told you, we are going to let that guy try. But for how long and to what end, if you've already got a really good track? So as much as in the studio you have to mix sounds and blend instruments, you have to mix egos and blend these egos together. And I'm sure, as you well know, having produced many more records than I have, it's much about being a psychologist. People have to feel like there's some sort of leadership going on in the studio, and the producer is the most logical person to provide that leadership, to be on time, to be prepared, to be the person who has a plan if you don't. And so that's what I feel my role is. I don't like to work with another engineer. There's two schools of thought, obviously. Two heads are better than one. One head is better than two. Each individual situation is different, and I will quote a little George Martin. George Martin says that two people in complete compatibility are definitely better than one person. But one person in many recording situations, is somewhat more effective. Here's an example. As an engineer, I perform MIDI sequencing, synthesis, sampling, studio recording, mixing, even mastering. As the engineer and the producer functioning as one person, I can look ahead 4 or 5 steps like a chessboard and sequence a MIDI track in such a way, because I know I'm going to do this with it on the console, or I know that I'm going to eventually add to it in some way later on. And just the pure idea of having to explain that to somebody else and watch them do it when I know full well it would be done by now. It's very difficult for me. So I'm a student of recording technology. My hardcore academic background is in signal flow and routing and using signal processors and digital audio, and I did a lot of physics in college, and I feel like I have a command of the studio equipment. And definitely I evolved as a producer from an engineer. Nobody just becomes a producer. You're either an artist, a musician, a manager, engineer, or something first. And my genesis is as an engineer. And so I just feel like I have a command of those skills, and I really don't use other folks. And I know that wasn't your initial question. Your initial question was, do they come into conflict with each other? And I think not. I think that the two skills, the production skills and the engineering skills, in one person's head can only be compatible, because I can discredit things. I can have a little conversation with myself and nobody even knew that it happened. Oh, I wanted to do this. Oh, no, I want to do this. Oh, I'll do it this way. Okay. Yeah. And it's very quick and effective, and it seems seamless to the client. I would like for the client to pretend I'm not even really there at times. And when there's only one person, that person has a certain sort of intimacy with you. It's just me and them in the studio. The vocalist and me, the producer engineer. And too many cooks in the kitchen can really ruin your stew, To fully answer the question, though, I have done some more large-scale, big band recordings. I just recently recorded and co-produced the music for the Chicago Bulls intro season. We took that Alan Parsons song, Sirius, and we, under the supervision of Andy Wachowski, who's the Matrix director, this was all his idea, was to make a new 2.5-minute intro video for the Chicago Bulls, because he thought that the old video sucked, and as well it did. And being a Hollywood film producer, he could just whip up a new one and get some free season tickets. But I worked with another producer on that project, so it's kind of relevant to this topic. And if you're in complete compatibility with that person, you can really get things done quick. We produced this whole 3-minute intro video music track in about 2 days, with 4 musicians and me and a producer. And it was quick. So it can be a very valuable experience to work with somebody else, obviously. Engineer is one of the backgrounds that lends itself to being a good producer. It's not the background that you must have. It's kind of like if you want to be the president, you can basically be in economics, you can be in health. There have been people who have delivered babies and also worked in the Senate. You can do a great many things to get from one place to another. But the genesis, or the sort of, I guess you could say that people are of the ilk of musicians or engineers before they are producers, almost across the board. There might be a few of those administrative people who work their way into being a producer, the more executive producer type folks who maybe have a management background. But to my mind, I feel strongly that you do not get into producing before you either know music extremely well from a musician's point of view, or you know recording extremely well from an engineer's point of view, or the two together. So I would advise students to learn about as much of both of those types of skill sets as they can, so that they can combine them at will and be more effective as a result. So the other thing to lend to your question about students who are aspiring to be producers, we have a meaningful conversation in my Producing 1 class about what the heck that word means, producer. In the beginning, producers were composers. And composers were the star icons of the music industry before recording took hold, And I guess the genesis of being a producer is being able to communicate with musicians. So how in the heck are you going to do that if you are not somewhat of a musician yourself, you see? But nowadays, the stardom about being a producer is a wholly different matter than it once was. I have had students in my class who admit to me on the first day of class that they are in my class producing recorded music 1 because they like what they've seen on TV. They like to see Pharrell put his arm around Clive Davis and Quincy at the same time on some red carpet. And they have no problem admitting to me that that's their goal. And I would tell them right off the bat, this producer is supposed to be behind the scenes. That is the function of a producer, obviously along with being objective, which I think is truly the most important function of being a producer. It is to benefit the career of the artist. Everything that you do should be for them, to get them up there to whatever kind of stardom, success, popularity. And lately, I feel like the word producer is almost the same as the word artist in the sense that you're going to be famous. You're going to be at the Grammys with something in your hand, you know, with people taking your picture and everything like that. That's not what I do. You know, I work in the studio. We don't have any windows. Okay, I never see the light of day. Okay, so we would have a little frank conversation about what that actually means, being a producer, before I would even recommend a certain type of curriculum. But the two types of curriculum that I recommend for producers are studio recording type classes, whether you want to call them audio and acoustics, sound recording technology, studio recording or anything like that, along with music. And not just music theory, music performance. You have to know what it feels like to be that person in that booth in front of that microphone. You just have to learn to play something. And when I do a big band, I mean, I haven't played trumpet, but I've played in groups with people who are playing trumpet. I've played alto saxophone. I've played a little bit of piano in my life. I've majored in guitar. I feel like I could relate to even somebody playing like an oud or something like that. I would have some way to relate to their abilities. So it would just be imprudent for somebody to do that with no background. Now, can you remind me, who the heck is that guy's name on American Idol? The guy who calls everybody out? Simon is the guy's name. Now, Simon has a different story. Folks have asked Simon, well, how can you tell all these people that they suck so hard? Who are you? What do you do? And sometimes I feel like that person because, you know, I don't tell people that they suck the same way that he does. These people are my clients, so I don't kick them off the stage, you know. But his answer was very interesting. And this is the exact opposite of what I've just said. I've said study, learn sound recording, learn music, edify yourself, have palettes of music in your head, constantly listen to music. He says, don't do any of that. He says, I am the right person to ask because I know just about as much as the average music consumer and nothing more. You know, and I don't know that there's much to that philosophy, but his philosophy is that he's the right person to do artist development or to choose the next big thing because he really doesn't sing, he doesn't play an instrument. All he knows how to do is enjoy music, and that's it. So put a little bit of that into what I just said and say, along with being very musically savvy, technically savvy, you also have to be able to be just a laid-back kind of music consumer at times and just realize how this is going to be presented to somebody who is not very musical. You wouldn't believe the words that we've come up with in the studio, the new words that we more smoothly, more whatever, the adjectives that I try to use as a library to explain myself. I try to have 7 to 10 different ways of explaining the same thing to a person. And I don't feel like they should just get what I'm saying right away. It's just like writing an essay. You write that first draft, you take it down to the writing center, you realize you didn't quite say what you just think you said. You said something in your own head that didn't really translate itself onto paper. So a lot of that happens with me and my artists, where I'll try to use words in the English language first, to describe what I'm going after. And then maybe there's 2 other schools of thought. Play it for them would be another way. Go out in the booth and show them. Put your hands on the guitar and do it with them. The third way is to, some people disagree with this, stop the session if you can. If you're at a dead, you're at the end of the road, you're at a dead end, and it seems like words in the English language aren't working, me helping them, showing them sonically is not working, you can take a break too, And that's why I like to work at night. I like to work at night because there's not another client coming in. And if we want to stop at 1, we can stop at 1. If we want to stop at 10:30 p.m., we can stop then. And that's a very helpful scenario where people can go and have a 2 or 3 days off to think about why they got stuck on that piano track. I had a guy in the studio last week who did a single piano track for 4 hours on one 4-minute song. And, you know, obviously this person wasn't particularly ready to be in the studio, and I had my plan and he had his plan, and apparently we weren't as incompatibility like I would have liked to have been. I thought we were. But I told him after a while, I said, you know, don't worry, man. I'm going to cut you a break. We're going to let you out of here early. We're not going to charge you for the rest of the time because it's late. No one else is going to be coming in. And just don't take it too hard. Don't feel like you have failed today, please, because this is all a big experiment. Oh, man. Of the art of music, I would say Selling England by the Pound by Genesis would probably be my all-time favorite record because of the art, not because of the production. You know, it's sort of mid-70s sounding. As far as the art of production, The Royal Scam. And what I do in my class on the first day, we have a little listening experience, and I perform the demos that Donald Fagen and Walter Becker have released of songs from The Royal Scam. So Caves of Altamira would be one. Throw Back the Little Ones, I know that's not off that album, but different Steely Dan songs in their raw form, where the students can hear Donald Fagen singing out of tune, sounding like crap, right? Banging out some you know, what seems to be like an underthought, underproduced, poor piece of music. And I say to my students, I say, you know, don't just tell me that this sucks, this demo that you've just heard, because it became a hit record, okay? Because it doesn't suck, all right? But now pretend I just came into your studio and I just played you this song. The Caves of Altamira is a good one. On the demo, it sounds bung bung bunk ba-dunk ba-dung dung bung bung bunk ba-dunk ba-dung dung. And 4 bars into it, the students are just like, oh, Bob, what are you doing to me? And then we play them the fully mixed and released version with horns and electric piano and guitars worked in there and chordal progressions and crescendos and doubled lyrical content and awesome harmonies and a great mix and drum solos, and they're just like, I can't believe that a record that is so good started off so bad. And my point is, everybody sucks, okay? Michael Jackson sucks. If you go and you buy the new Thriller and you listen to the last couple of takes on Thriller, the new one, they have demos of songs like Billie Jean. I perform those for my students. There's a demo from Billie Jean from 1981, which is several years before they actually released Thriller. And on that take in Michael Jackson's basement, you can tell he doesn't know the words to his own song. He hasn't figured out the lyrics yet. He's completely off key. The song is only a verse, a chorus, and an outro. I mean, the average person would say, scrap this, come up with something better, you know. But the producer is supposed to say, no, there's a Billie Jean in this song. We can figure this out. It's going to be hundreds of different decisions and hours and days and months and whatever. But you have to somehow recognize the forest through the trees and see the whole picture at the same time. So don't discredit things that suck initially would be one thing that I would say to my students, because even your favorite albums, the best productions, Thriller, maybe the best production ever, as far as a universal appeal, where there's, you know, songs, dance songs, love songs, R&B songs, rock songs, and they're all so well done. Don't think Michael Jackson went into the booth and just did that, okay? He might have been working on Billie Jean for more than 2 years, you know. So when I try to explain production to students, I say, here, listen to this great album, but don't get discouraged that your band doesn't sound like this, okay? Because when they went into the studio and they laid down these songs for the first time, it sucked. Even Steely Dan. The things that I do in the studio with digital recording technology can be looked at as very positive and very negative. I do have an analog tape machine in my studio. So we have a 24-track Atari MTR-90. We have some reserves of analog tape left over, and I do erase old tapes and record over them for fun. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll take the multi-track sends and mult them to Pro Tools and tape simultaneously, sync them up with SMPTE. Even if the client isn't paying for the tape, I've got a pile of old tapes, and I'll do that. When the clients know that the tape is running, they are on point. They are not expecting me to perform a miracle as soon as I hit stop. Oh, I was off key. Oh, I was out of time. Oh, can you move this snare drum around? No. This is a tape machine. This is no different than what you have in your cassette player. You can't just cut those individual sounds out and move them around. You got to cut the whole thing. If you all screw up, maybe then I can fix it. But if just you screw up, this is not a keeper. So one can make the argument that digital recording methods have lowered people's expectations of themselves in the studio. There are two ways to go and record in the studio as far as the tracking aspect of it. You're going to see right off the bat which one I favor. It's obvious. There's idea number one. Idea number one is I need to sit with these tracks for a long time. They need to marinate in my mind before I can pick out the best guitar solo. Some artists do not have the objectivity, even if I help them, to go in the studio, come back in the other room, and say, that's good, I'm going to keep that. I have a client, who shall remain nameless, who likes to go and do 15, 20 guitar solos. And then I will print him a CD. And if he wasn't paying me, I would never do this, because I say, come to terms with what you just played and pick one. But he will want a CD of 19, 20 different versions of this song with different guitar solos. And only a week later will he pick out the ending from track 14 and paste it into the beginning of take 12, and take 7 and 8 are going to be crossfaded together in the middle. And that's going to make a great guitar solo. What is going to happen if people keep doing that? They're going to go in there, going to do word by word now. The whole idea of music performance is going to be an artifact if that keeps happening. So what digital recording has allowed people to do is not make decisions and wait. Whereas when you're recording analog, people say, that was bad, I'm going to do it again. And when they say I'm going to do it again, they're going to do the whole guitar solo, not bar 1 through 4, and then you're going to punch me in bar 6 through 7, and then come on. What digital recording allows me to do, though, I will tell you this. Sometimes I wake up 2 in the morning. I live across the street from the studio because some of my clients are late, and I got really fed up with going back and forth on buses at 2 and 3 in the morning. So I said, to heck with it. I'm going to move in. And sometimes I'll wake up at 2 in the morning and I'll say, oh, I've got it. I'm going to head down to the studio, and I know what I'm going to do now. And I'm going to pull up this song, and I'm going to work on it. I'm going to get my guitar out, and I'm going to lay that part down, because it just came to me while I was fooling around in my house. If my session is mixed on an analog audio console, I will take that into consideration before I just run down to the studio. Because it can take a good hour and a half to put one of my mixes together. Just the routing of the patch points can take about a good half an hour to make sure you've got it right and check all the signals and fix all the boxes. And then go through the entire audio console, resetting each button and the knob and switch on each sort of channel in the entire 56 faders that I use for every song. Okay? By the time I'm done with that, I am no longer inspired. I am like, oh, I just turned 50,000 knobs, and now I don't want to do that guitar solo anymore. With Pro Tools, if I get all excited about doing something at 2:30 in the morning, I can hop down to the studio. If my song is mixed in Pro Tools, I can load that bad boy up on my FireWire drive, plug in my guitar, and do that part. And all the settings will be magically revealed and set back to where they once were. And that is a benefit of digital recording technology. The fact that I can instantly, spontaneously recreate my mix in a multi-track format and add to it at any given time is probably what makes my record sound good. Because it's not always when you're in the studio on the clock that you think of great things to do. Sometimes it is at 2 in the morning. We did a shootout, or I've done a shootout, and DePaul University uses our studio to do shootouts every year. And the shootout is a blind taste test. Now, the students who are participating in the shootout, albeit are not professional recording engineers and have not spent 10,000 hours in front of a console and probably aren't the best people to do this judgment. But we do record a multi-track band in the studio just like I had explained, you take the mics, you send them into the console, and you split them to these two different mediums. First, you have to calibrate the tape machine to the input level of Pro Tools so that, you know, a tone generator will show up equally intense on a channel on the tape machine as it will in the hard Pro Tools system. And then the students turn around, close their eyes, and we automate all the faders. So there's the first bank of 24 faders on one solo button, and the second bank of 24 faders on another, and we go. I mean, it's seamless. You can't really tell. And the students are saying, oh, which one is it now? I don't know. You tell me. Then they switch. And they switch again. When you're talking about a whole piece of music, and there are many multiple instruments, I frankly feel it's very difficult to tell the difference between a very well-calibrated Pro Tools system and a tape machine, depending on the frequency response of the tape machine, because there are many different sounding tape machines. But a very balanced, even tape machine with a linear frequency response that isn't sort of wacky. This isn't like a trebly tape machine or one that has a lot of bass or anything like that. It's very hard to tell the difference. Individually, in more subtle situations where there aren't 7 or 10 instruments as part of this mix, it's much easier, based on the artifact of tape hiss, which is something that you'll never get rid of, and also just something about the envelope of a tape machine. Tom drums are something I can tell. I can kind of tell if a tom drum was recorded onto a tape machine or onto Pro Tools because of the transient. What a tape machine does when it is confronted with a signal that changes amplitude rapidly is it kind of rounds that off a little bit. It's not reactive enough. It doesn't have what we call the sensitivity of a digital recording system. So sometimes people use the adjective smooth to describe the way that a tape machine sounds. I would say it just is slow. It reacts slower. It literally does smooth out the waveform of sound. So even what I've done is to take a digital recording and an analog recording of the same band, and then take that analog recording and dump it into Pro Tools and look at the waveforms. And what you'll notice is that the kick drum on the tape machine literally has a smoother curve to it. You can see it. And the one in Pro Tools is sharper. And the reason for that is the sensitivity of the tape machine. So I think our ears relate to analog because all professional records that we know of from the classic era of, say, like after World War II, all the way up to 1995-ish, were all done on tape. Our ears are so used to hearing that. When I hear Led Zeppelin, that's all tape stuff. And God knows how many millions of times I've listened to Led Zeppelin. So why shouldn't that sound good to me? Right? If all records were done on Pro Tools for the last 50 years, I think people would have an affinity for that sound. So I'm not so sure that bringing back tape machines and firing those bad boys up is really necessary, personally. As long as you can get your musicians to play well and understand that you're not a magic maker and they actually do have to play their instruments well, I vote for Pro Tools. Cubase, Sonar, Logic, Pro Tools, and Digital Performer are the same thing. And they are a means to an end, much the same way Microsoft Word is a means to an end. If I become a Microsoft Word operator, I am not going to get hired as an editorial columnist as a result. You know, if I am a Pro Tools operator, I am by no means a recording engineer as a result. This is the simple application. And the word application is the best way you can use it for. You need to have this thing to do what you do. But the technique of making a great record has predated Pro Tools by a long shot. Nobody disagrees with me when I say Thriller sounds great, doesn't it? Everybody likes Thriller. No computers in that room. They didn't have Pro Tools. They had great mics. They had great signal flow, tremendous EQ, signal processing, audio consoles, and they had great instruments, and they performed well. And that's what makes a record sound good, not Pro Tools. If you don't have Pro Tools, you can use Cubase. I don't think it's going to sound any different. Elliot Shiner loves Cubase. He does the Eagles. He does Steely Dan. Clearly, you can use Cubase. Peter Gabriel uses Logic. Peter Gabriel owns SSL. Let's face it, he could buy DigiDesign if he wanted to buy the entire company. And he uses Logic. So you can't say that you need Pro Tools for a great record. That is not a good argument. And I try to instill in my students that the techniques that you're learning from me are production techniques that have been around well before Pro Tools. And Pro Tools was devised and based off of pre-existing analog studios. Basically, Pro Tools is a mixing console and a tape machine in your computer. And man, is it unfortunate that people think that they can go to Guitar Center and they can spend money and make a great record based on how much money they spend. And that is such bull, I can't tell you. You can't go buy objectivity at Guitar Center. You can't go buy good microphone technique at Guitar Center. You can't go buy a good ear to use your EQ at Guitar Center. And if you spend, or Guitar Center, Sam Goody or whoever, Sam Asher or whatever, I'm not ragging on Guitar Center here. Music retailers such as them, they promote the idea that the equipment is what's important and the user is what's important. I use a lot of analogies here in my class, and one of them is Emeril Lagasse comes over to my house to cook dinner. I've got plastic forks. I've got one pot. He is going to whip up the best chicken cordon bleu you've ever tasted because he's Emeril Lagasse and he can do it with plastic forks. If I go to the Ritz-Carlton and try and make chicken cordon bleu, even with $1 million worth of cooking equipment, I'm going to fool it up. I don't know how to make chicken cordon bleu. I can make a good record with a tape machine, with Cubase, with Logic, Sonar, Reason, Ableton, whatever. It's a technique, and the gear has got to be looked at as an afterthought. The beating heart of your studio nowadays is your computer. Do not skimp out on your computer. Spend as much money as you can in your budget on your computer. And then immediately think to yourself about your backup storage medium. People think, oh, my files are on my computer. Oh, fine. Y2K, power outage, okay? Not fine. You spend money on a computer, you spend money on multiple hard drives, maybe a DVD backup system like Retrospect or something. And that's the beating heart of their computer. That's where the horsepower comes from. You want to pull up a vocal processor, you want to pull up lots of EQs, you want to have lots of tracks, your computer has to say, okay. And if you skimp out and you buy the cheapest Windows machine that you can buy, you are severely limiting yourself based on the fact that as soon as you decide to have another creative idea, oh, I want a reverb on that. Computer says, no more reverb. I'm a proponent of Macintoshes. I wrote an article I was interviewed for an article in Interview magazine about the difference between Macs and PCs and what I think on that topic. And I will tell you right now, if Bill Gates ever meets me, I'm going to have to run. He's going to want to get a piece of me because I am not a big fan of the PCs. I think Macs are awesome. We've had Macs in my studio that have been running for 4 years that never get turned off. That's amazing to me, personally. Second most important thing you can buy in your studio is your interface. And your interface is going to dictate how many inputs and outputs you have simultaneously. So if you buy an interface like you buy the M-Box because it's the cheapest interface that you can find, well, eventually I hope you are going to aspire to put up more than 2 microphones at some point in your life. So if you're going to buy a home studio setup, get something with at least 8 inputs or 16 inputs so that you have creative ability to say, oh, I want to put another mic over there on that cymbal. Or I'd like to do acoustic and a DI, a mic and a DI or something like that. Don't limit yourself by getting a 2-channel interface. That will not suffice. And then what makes great sounds are great instruments. So if you don't have a good guitar, go buy a good guitar. All right, that's first. Then a great mic, a great preamp, and signal processing would be an afterthought. Hard thing to do is get good sounds with just mics and preamps. But I'll tell you, it can be done. I used to teach in a room that was not much of a studio. It was basically one room with a window attached to another room. And in the room was a drummer with microphones, cables through the tie lines through the wall. They go right into or the Sci-Tech preamps and then right into Pro Tools. No outboard, anything. No console. There was one of those Huey human interfaces, whatever. And I had to show the class how to get great sounds with no compressors, with no EQs, with no filters. And the way you do that is you move around the mics. You choose different mics. You change the distance between the mic and the source. You change the angle of the mic. You tune your drums, right? And if people would spend more time on those types of techniques, those things that happen in the room, as opposed to what happens inside of your computer, you'll realize that you need your computer less and less. What I've realized is as I mix, I use fewer and fewer EQs. It used to be when you look at a mix that I've done, you're going to see 48 equalizers in. Every single sound EQ'd. And if you can get the right sound from starting at the microphone and not screw it up on the way into the tape machine with a good preamp and no distortion and no background noise, no ambience, that's what you should really be concentrating on. So you're going to build a home studio, get yourself a monster computer, get at least an 8 to 16 channel interface, and get good mics and preamps. Pretty simple. And headphones that isolate so you don't get bleed.
Well, thanks very much for talking.
Oh, I wish I could stay.